They left me at the side of the road the morning after my husband's burial. A man I gave 32 years to. I still had the scent of his casket flowers on my dress, and they left me with nothing but a folder of papers and a set of rusted diner keys. The road was quiet. You could hear the gravel spit under their tires as the car pulled away. I stood there holding my purse like it was a lifeline, watching the dust settle around my shoes. They didn't even look back. Not my son. Not my daughter-in-law. Not one word about where I'd sleep or what I'd eat. Just, the diner's yours now, Mama. Make do. Before I tell you the rest of it, I need you to do one thing. If you find yourself drawn in by these words, if you feel the weight of what I'm about to share, please subscribe. Leave a comment if any piece of this story lives somewhere inside you. It matters more than you think. Now, let me go on. The diner sat off Route 19, just past the old cotton mill that had been abandoned long before anyone cared to put up a sign. It had once been something. Kelly's place. I remember it in the 50s, bright red booths, the smell of bacon in the morning, farmers coming in with muddy boots and hands like tree bark. My husband had worked in the back kitchen when he was young, before the war took half his hearing and most of his peace. We used to sit in that corner booth, the one closest to the window, and plan our whole life. Marriage, kids, a house with yellow curtains. We got some of that. But dreams, I've learned, tend to rot if you don't feed them. He left in 1972. Just packed a small suitcase and said he needed air. Left me with 3 children and a deed to a building that hadn't served a hot meal in nearly a decade. I hadn't set foot in that diner since the day he walked out. Until the morning they left me there alone, with nothing but the key. The door stuck when I pushed it open. Had to put my shoulder into it. Inside, the air was thick with mildew and regret. The booths sagged. The counter was chipped. A family of raccoons had taken up residence in the dry storage closet. But the clock above the register still ticked. Just slow, like it had aged too. I walked the floor slowly, my heels clicking like apologies. I traced my fingers along the counter, over old carvings, initials, love hearts, curse words fading into dust. That night, I slept in booth 6 with my coat pulled over my knees, and the sound of mice scratching in the walls. The first week passed in a haze of silence. No one called. I didn't turn on the radio. I lived off crackers and water from the bathroom sink. On the 8th morning, I found the courage to open the file folder they'd left with me. Inside was the deed, one set of utility records, and a note scribbled on the back of an envelope in my son's handwriting. This is all we can offer, Mama. We're drowning. You're strong. You'll figure it out. I wanted to scream, but my throat wouldn't open. Just like it hadn't opened all those years ago when I heard my husband mutter, "I'm leaving," under his breath, like it was just another errand. I'd swallowed pain back then. I did it again now. I started cleaning. Not because I had a plan. Just because it gave my hands something to do while my heart gave up. Every day I wiped, scrubbed, pulled cobwebs from corners. I found old ledgers, menus, photos tucked between the floorboards. I even found a receipt with my name on it, 2 cheeseburgers, coffee, and peach pie. Dated 1956. The ink was faded, but the memory bloomed like it happened yesterday. After 2 weeks, I plugged in the old coffee pot. It hissed and sputtered, but finally poured something dark into a chipped mug. I drank it watching the sun rise through grease-streaked windows. That's when I felt it for the first time in years, a flicker of something like peace. By the end of that month, I'd scrubbed every inch of that place. Got a contractor from town to look at the pipes. Told him I'd pay him once things got running. He looked at me like I was crazy. "Ma'am," he said, "ain't nobody coming back to eat here." I looked him in the eye and said, "I don't need everybody. Just somebody." Word got around. The widow was fixing up Kelly's place. The crazy one who got left behind. Some pitied me. Some whispered I'd lost my mind. But the baker down the street donated a box of day-old muffins. A teenager offered to repaint the sign. The librarian brought me old recipe books. I opened on a Sunday. No grand announcement. Just a sign on the window that said, "Coffee's hot. Come in." For people showed up. All older than me. All alone. They sat quiet, like they'd forgotten what it felt like to belong somewhere. I poured coffee and served eggs with burnt toast. One of them cried when I offered seconds. He hadn't been spoken to in 3 days. By month's end, the booths were half full most mornings. The food was simple: grits, eggs, strong coffee, biscuits. Nothing fancy. But people came. Not for the menu, but for the stillness. For the music I played low on the radio. For the sound of someone saying their name with warmth. I never called my son again. He didn't call me either. But one afternoon, his daughter, my granddaughter, showed up at the door with a school fundraiser flyer in her hand. She was 15, shy, wearing chipped nail polish and a sweater too big. "Dad said you might help," she muttered. I bought 5 candles and gave her pie on the house. She sat in that same corner booth where her grandfather once held my hand under the table. Sometimes, late at night, I walk the floor of the diner and run my hands across the counter like it's an old friend. I still sleep in booth 6 when the air gets cold and the house behind the diner feels too far from the world. I talk to the walls sometimes. To Mark. To myself. I say things I never got to say. I say, I made it without you. They left me here to rot. And instead, I healed. Not loud, not pretty, but real. If you're still watching, still listening, thank you. Please, leave a comment. Subscribe if you haven't. Not for me, but so these stories, the real ones, the quiet ones, can keep finding people like you. Because somewhere, someone is standing by an old door with a key in their hand, wondering if it's too late. It's not. Not yet. I never expected the past to walk back in wearing work boots and a baseball cap. He stood there in the doorway of the diner, hands in his pockets like a schoolboy caught somewhere between shame and longing. My son. Gray at the temples now. Eyes just like his father's, but clouded with something Mark never wore: regret. He didn't speak right away. Just looked around at the place like it was the shell of something he once threw away, and now wished he hadn't. I kept wiping down the counter, slow circles, cloth damp from lemon water. You don't rush a moment like that. You let it breathe. Let it ache. He sat down on the 3rd stool from the right, the same one he used to crawl onto as a boy, feet not quite touching the floor. "Coffee?" he asked, voice thin. I nodded and poured. Black, no sugar. Just the way his father drank it. He wrapped his hands around the cup like it might warm more than his fingers. "I heard you were still here," he said. "Running this place." I didn't answer right away. The truth didn't need dressing up. I set a plate down beside his cup, pecan pie, warm, the crust still flaking from the morning bake. "Eat," I said softly. "You always needed food in you to think straight." He took a bite. Chewed slowly. Swallowed like it hurt. Then he looked up. "I was wrong to leave you like that. After Daddy died." I let the silence sit for a minute. Long enough for the weight of those words to settle in. Then I sat across from him, my knees aching from a long day on my feet. "You didn't just leave," I said, calm but clear. "You erased me. Like I was too much trouble. Too much memory. Too much proof of what love costs when it gets old. He flinched, but he didn't argue. Instead, he nodded. Just once. I didn't know how to hold grief. So I dropped it. Dropped you. That was the truest thing he'd ever said. I raised you to be better than that, I whispered. But I forgot to show you what it looks like to stay. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I talked to the lawyer. The motel, the old one, is fully yours now. I signed everything. I wanted to do something right, even if it was late. I didn't take the paper. Just let it rest on the counter between us like a peace offering with creases. You don't need to fix anything, I said. Just don't vanish again. We sat for a while longer. The bell over the door jingled once, twice. A man in overalls came in, asked for chili. I served him like I always do, refilled his water, smiled when he thanked me. My son watched it all. The way I moved. The way the place hummed with a quiet sort of warmth that only comes from women like me, women who survive. I used to think you were fragile, he said when the diner emptied again. But you're not. You're steel. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Steel rusts, I said. I'm something older than that. Something softer, but harder to break. He asked if he could visit again. I said yes. Because forgiveness isn't a door. It's a window you have to crack open every morning, even if the wind stings. After he left, I walked to the back room. Lila was sitting there, rocking her baby. The child had fallen asleep on her chest, tiny fingers curled like commas in a sentence she hadn't finished writing yet. I kissed the baby's head and handed Lila a note from a woman who'd dropped by earlier, someone from church who'd lost her husband to cancer last fall. She was donating extra supplies. Said she heard about what we were doing. People are listening, I told Lila. Even when they pretend not to care, they notice kindness. She smiled, weary but grateful. You changed everything, she said. No, I corrected. We did. Together. That night, I sat at the booth by the window, tea steeping, the diner dark except for one pendant light above me. I opened a small notebook I kept tucked in my apron. Inside were pages of names, women who'd passed through, girls who'd stayed a week, a night, a season. Notes beside their names. Left with hope. Called her mother back. Sent a letter to her sister. Every story mattered, even if I never heard the end of it. I locked the front doors of the diner just after midnight. The streets outside were quiet, the kind of quiet that hums with memory. My reflection in the glass looked older than I remembered, silver hair tucked under my scarf. Soft lines curved along my mouth, the ones you earn from smiling through sorrow. In the corner booth, a single plate sat with a half-eaten biscuit and a note scribbled in a nervous hand. Thank you. You reminded me my life isn't over yet. No name. No number. Just that. I stood still, holding the paper against my chest like a prayer. Somewhere deep in my chest, Mark's voice stirred again. You make a place a home, Mara. Doesn't matter how broken it is. You fill it with light. I walked back behind the counter, set the kettle on, and reached into the drawer where I kept old postcards, leftovers from another time. I picked one out, wrote a message on the back, and slid it under the cash register. If you're reading this, know that healing happens in the quiet. Stay a while. Have some pie. Let the silence hold you. I turned out the lights one by one, each room glowing a little before the dark took over. And just before I stepped out the back, I whispered into the hush. You didn't win silence. You just gave me space to rebuild. Then I closed the door and walked home under a sky full of stars. I didn't sleep much that night. The house creaked with wind, the kind that whistles low like it's carrying secrets from other lifetimes. I sat at the kitchen table with a chipped mug of tea, fingers tracing the wood grain, wondering how many other women had done the same. Wondered if they, too, had stared into that quiet space between memory and now, deciding whether to feel or just keep going. The diner had started to attract regulars. A mechanic who brought his mother every Wednesday. A young mother with twins who sat in the corner booth, letting them nap while she finished a quiet coffee. A teenage girl who came in with bruises that didn't match her story, and left with a slice of pie she didn't ask for but always finished. No one said much at first, but I learned how to listen with more than ears. You hear pain in the way someone folds their napkin, how they look at the door like it might bite them. You hear it in long silences that thud heavier than words. And somehow, they started calling me Miss Mara again. I hadn't been called that since Mark was alive. Miss Mara, you got more of that peach cobbler? Miss Mara, your hands okay? That arthritis better today? Each time someone said it, I felt like a piece of myself came back from the shadows. One morning, I found a handwritten letter tucked into the tip jar. No money, just words. My mama said you helped her find herself again. She said the way you poured her coffee made her believe she still had worth. Thank you. I held that letter like scripture. Some people think healing is a grand thing, tears and confessions and stages. But I've learned it can be as simple as someone remembering your name with kindness. A few weeks later, the building inspector came in. He was young and impatient, tapping at his tablet like he wanted to be anywhere else. But then he looked around the clean booths, the repaired windows, the row of mismatched but shining coffee cups, and he blinked twice. This place used to be a wreck, he muttered. You do all this yourself? I smiled gently. With a little help. And a lot of grief. He nodded, typed something into his tablet, then added, It's got soul now. That's when I knew the place wasn't just standing. It was singing. But not all stories sew up with a bow. I still walk home alone most nights. My daughter hasn't called in months. Sometimes I catch myself looking at the phone, wondering if she'll ever come back, this time with something more than apologies and empty hands. I've learned to stop waiting. The love I have to give, it lives here now, in every pot of coffee brewed, every stranger welcomed in out of the cold. I look at my hands, worn, knotted with time, and I no longer see what I've lost. I see what I've carried, and what I've passed on. If you've listened this far, thank you. Not many people sit still long enough to hear the quiet things. The kind of stories we tuck in drawers with our wedding rings and old photographs. I suppose I'm telling mine now because I finally believe it deserves to be heard. Not out of bitterness, but out of remembrance. You see, when you've been discarded, set aside like the last slice of pie no one wants, you begin to question whether your story matters. But let me tell you, sometimes the deepest healing begins when the room is empty, and all you have is silence and a little bit of faith. I built this place not to prove anything, but to remind myself that I'm still here. That dignity doesn't require an audience. It just needs truth. And if you're listening now, if you've ever felt forgotten, I hope my story tells you this. You are not done. You are not broken beyond repair. You are simply waiting to come home to yourself. So like, comment, or subscribe if this story stirred something in you. Not for me, but for the next soul who needs to know they're not alone. My name is Meredith Collins. But around here, they just call me Miss Mara. And this old diner, well, it's more than a building. It's my second skin, my stitched-together hope. It's where I stopped waiting for rescue and started remembering how to rise. The lights are dimmed now. The chairs are up. The pie tins are empty. But the door is never truly closed.